In 1651, a husband and wife stood inside a wooden meeting house on the Connecticut River frontier. 6 years earlier, they had been married in that same room. Now, their neighbors were accusing them both of witchcraft. This was Springfield, Massachusetts, 40 years before Salem ever became a word people feared. Springfield in the 1640s was barely a town. About 100 people lived along a muddy stretch of Main Street beside the Connecticut River. There was no transplanted congregation here, no shared church mission. This was a company town. One man had founded it, financed it, and ran it. William Pynchon, a fur trader from Essex who had moved west from the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1636 to be closer to the beaver trade. Pynchon was the town's banker, its magistrate, its employer, and its judge. He decided who got land, who got work, and who faced court. Every dispute ran through him. Into this tight little settlement came two people who did not quite fit. Mary Lewis had crossed the Atlantic from the Welsh borderlands in 1640, escaping a failed marriage to a man who had tried to force her to convert to Catholicism. She arrived alone, without a husband or male relatives, unusual and uncomfortable in Puritan New England. She found work in the household of Pynchon's pregnant daughter. Hugh Parsons arrived around the same time. He was a brickmaker, a difficult trade, but one Springfield desperately needed. Pynchon gave him a house, farmland, and steady work. Hugh wore a red vest, smoked a clay pipe, and had a temper that made people uneasy. On October 27th, 1645, Mary and Hugh married in the new meeting house. They had 3 children, Hannah, Samuel, and Joshua. They tried to build a life at the far end of Main Street. It did not go well. Hugh fought with his neighbors over work, money, and respect. He asked the Smiths, Pynchon's own son-in-law's family, for extra plowing work and was refused. He swore revenge. Weeks later, 2 of the Smith grandchildren, Margaret and Sarah, fell sick and died within days of each other. The family began to wonder whether the Parsons had something to do with it. Mary, meanwhile, had her own suspicions. She told a grieving neighbor that the deaths and misfortunes around them were the work of a witch. When pressed, she named a widow named Mercy Marshfield. The accusation backfired. Marshfield had better connections. Instead of a witchcraft trial, Mary was hauled into court for slander and ordered to pay £3 in silver. After the slander trial, the whispers turned around. If Mary Parsons knew so much about witchcraft, how exactly did she know? Hugh's temper kept making things worse. He showed up uninvited at neighbors' homes, what people called sleeveless errands, visits with no purpose. He grabbed a piece of firewood in anger and nearly threw it at Mary before slowly lowering his arm. The town needed him to make bricks. They could not stand him otherwise. Mary grew terrified inside her own home. Her second child, Samuel, had died. Hugh had taken in boarders, up to 9 people crammed into one small house. He was often away, and Mary began to believe that her husband might be the witch. One night, while Hugh slept beside her, she lifted the bed covers and searched his body for a witch's mark, a scar believed to prove someone had fed a demonic familiar. She found nothing. She believed it anyway. Then, on a Sunday in February 1651, Mary went to the alehouse during the midday break from church. She later said that while sitting among her neighbors, she was transported. Her body stayed in the room, but her soul was pulled to a gathering of the devil. She saw Hugh there and 2 other Springfield women, dancing, sometimes in their own shapes, sometimes as cats. She told no one. Within days, more neighbors came forward to William Pynchon with their own stories. The cobbler Simon Bowman said Hugh had demanded a favor, been refused, and sworn revenge. And that afternoon, Bowman's horse had bolted for no reason, nearly killing him. Families reported unexplained fits and illnesses. The testimony kept growing. On February 26, 1651, Pynchon issued an arrest warrant for Mary. The next day, he issued one for Hugh. Springfield did not have a jail, so Hugh was sent to stay with the town constable. Mary was kept under house arrest to care for the children. Less than a week later, their youngest son, Joshua, 4 months old, suddenly died. The town recorder wrote one line: Joshua Parsons was killed by Mary Parsons. Pynchon questioned Mary. She confessed. She said she had allowed the devil to pass through her body at the alehouse, and she admitted to killing Joshua. But Pynchon himself was losing authority. Months earlier, his theological book had been publicly condemned by the General Court in Boston. A hangman had burned copies in the marketplace, one of the first book burnings in English North America. Boston officials decided Pynchon could not handle this witch panic alone. The case was transferred to the capital. In late March, Mary and Hugh were marched 100 miles to Boston and locked in the city's first jail, a damp, dark, pest-infested room. Mary was charged with witchcraft and with the murder of her son. When the court asked for her plea, she said not guilty of witchcraft, guilty of killing her child. The judges agreed. They found the witchcraft evidence insufficient. For the murder, she was condemned to hang. Mary never faced the executioner. She died in prison sometime in May 1651, her health broken by the journey and the conditions. She was probably in her early 40s. Hugh waited. He waited more than a year. In May 1652, the Court of Assistants convicted him of witchcraft. 14 days later, the General Court reversed the verdict. Too much of the testimony had been written down rather than given in person, and the key witness, his own wife, was dead. Hugh Parsons walked out of prison after 15 months. He took his surviving daughter Hannah, now 6 years old, and left Massachusetts for Rhode Island. No reliable record traces him after that. William Pynchon left too. He returned to Springfield just long enough to transfer his properties to his son, then sailed back to England in the spring of 1652. He never came back. The town he had founded, financed, and judged had slipped beyond his control. One detail connects this story forward. The copy of Pynchon's condemned book that survives in the Springfield Museum's exhibition, one of only 11 known copies, carries a handwritten name inside the front cover: Cotton Mather, the Puritan minister who 40 years later helped fuel the Salem witch trials. Mather signed the book in 1673, 20 years before Salem. He knew what had happened to Mary and Hugh Parsons. The first witch panic in colonial New England and the last are connected by a signature in a banned book. The people of Springfield were not stupid. They were frightened, and they were looking for an explanation. Children died, crops failed, horses bolted, milk went bad. In a world where the devil was as real as the river outside your door, a couple who did not quite fit, a woman with a sharp tongue and a man with a short temper, became the answer to every question the town could not solve. That is what a witch panic is. It is a community deciding that the easiest way to explain ordinary suffering is to find someone nearby to blame.